Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. Today, we're continuing our series in the Player's Handbook, talking about the classes and how they have evolved over the years. Today, we're discussing one of the most difficult classes to play in the game, the Sorcerer. Sorcerers are full casters, often compared to the wizard as such, but they are one of the ones that have quite a few complicated mechanics that are built in to their class. And because of this, they are a tricky one. I wouldn't want a first time player to play a sorcerer unless they were confident. Of course, this depends on the person, this depends on the build, but there is a lot to discuss with the sorcerer that makes them incredibly customizable. As such, it's kind of hard to talk about them in an objective ranking sense, but I'm going to do my best to talk about how they've changed and how I view them now. Before we get into the details, though, I'd like to let you know Relax Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can support me here on YouTube and get a couple benefits. First, you get a little badge next to your name in the comments, letting folks know that you're a supporter. But also, you get early access to my videos. I upload videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I upload them a day early for members only. If that interests you, you can click the join button just down there next to the subscribe button. I'd love to see you in the comments with your member badges. And if it doesn't interest you, that's totally fine too. Just watching the video at all, liking, subscribing, all that stuff that costs nothing is a great way to support my channel. So thank you for being here and watching my content here on YouTube. So, let's talk sorcerers. Level 1. Sorcerers get a lot of stuff to discuss. So, first of all, their hit die is a d6. This means that a sorcerer with a 14 constitution will start the game with 8 hit points. It's as low as you can go. Only the wizard shares this hit die, so they are the squishiest pair in the game. And yeah, basically the sorcerer is the person that the tank wants to protect. You're not going to be a person with a lot of health. Now there are ways, of course, to boost it in game, but I have to give this 7 out of 10 because it's as low as it gets. Now, as far as saving throws go, you are proficient in Constitution saving throws and Charisma saving throws. Now, the sorcerer getting con saves naturally is actually one of the reasons why people like to take them. They are very good at keeping their concentration, not to mention resisting poisons and other things. Charisma saves are a little more rare. They definitely are more focused on, extra planar powers and force of will. But I still think that it's good that you have them. You're a charisma caster after all. So I give these 9 out of 10 and 8 out of 10 respectively. Now, sorcerers do not get a big list of skills that they can choose from. They can pick Arcana if they want. But they only get a list of 6, and they can only choose 2 of them. So sorcerers are not a skill-based build. Again, I give this 7 out of 10. There's not a whole lot here. Then we continue this trend with our weapons. They are proficient in simple weapons. So, a sorcerer with a staff, a sorcerer with a dagger, a sorcerer with a crossbow. This is about as much as you're going to get because sorcerers don't use their weapons, really. I mean, if they are in a situation where they can't use magic for some reason, it's nice to have a weapon, but it's just not going to be something they need. The simple weapons provide a fair amount of options. If you wanted to build a strength-based sorcerer for some reason, you could. I wouldn't, but yeah, 7 out of 10 for that. And then, of course, there's their armor. They don't get any armor proficiency. None at all, unfortunately. And that's kind of sad. It would have been cool to put them in light armor, but I guess it's not thematic. Yeah, it's 5 out of 10, because there is no armor here to be spoken of. They need mage armor, or shield, or nothing. However, of course, at level 1, they are granted their sorceress magic, their spell casting. And spell casting is the bread and butter of the sorcerer. They are full casters, gaining spell levels every couple levels, and all the way up to 9th level spells. They are one of the few classes in the game who get access to Wish naturally. Their spell list is pretty stacked. They've got a lot of utility and offensive magic. They are charisma casters, which is, I believe, the best skill to use for casting, because not only does it power up your magic, but it also powers up your social interaction. So, yeah, there's a lot you can do with charisma casting. The only real downside to sorcerers is that they do not get to choose their spells when they long rest. They have to choose them when they level up. Meaning that when you commit to a sorcerer, you do get to change them out every time you level up, but you don't get to do that regularly in game. So most of the time, when you've chosen your spells as a sorcerer, you're sticking with them. Now, that's fine, but the sorcerers also don't get a huge list of spells. They've gotten better since the 2014 Player's Handbook, where they used to get up to 15, I believe, by the end of the game. Now it's 22. And they scale a little more throughout the time, but they certainly don't have a massive list. Yeah, I'm going to give their spell casting 9 out of 10. Charisma casting, full casting, all good stuff. And the only real downside is that they have to commit to their spells. The only other thing they get at level 1 is called Innate Sorcery. This is an ability you can use twice per long rest. Unfortunately, you don't get more uses of it throughout the game. Well, you kind of do. We'll talk about that. But yeah, it's stuck at 2. You can activate this, and when you do, you basically brim with natural magic, which is the point of a sorcerer. Sorcerers are those who were born with their magic. They kind of naturally get it through their bloodline, and they don't have to like train with it or buy it from any other kind of creature. So innate sorcery is just an example of them powering themselves up with their natural magic. The way it works is that you get a +1 to your spell save DC when this is active, and you get advantage on all attack-based spells. Now, this is actually very good in very specific builds. There's a lot of builds that focus on saving throw-based spells, and the +1 to your spell save DC is nothing to scoff at, but it's certainly not a game changer. Advantage on all attacks, however, is, and the fact that you get this right from level 1 kind of tells me that Wizards of the Coast is trying to tell us that sorcerers are blasters first. They want to be shooting spells that are targeting creatures, not that are creating big AoE effects. Now, of course, you can do either one, and I suggest that you have both in your arsenal, but the fact that you want to be casting spells that shoot people with attack rolls, because you will always have advantage on those as long as innate sorcery is active. It lasts for a minute, doesn't take concentration, so you're able to do this, twice a day, pretty routinely, and that gives you, in an important fight, a huge advantage, no pun intended, to have advantage on your shots. It means that you're going to hit with your spells much more often. I think it's very strong. It never gets old. Having advantage is always good. And yeah, I'm going to give Innate Sorcery 10 out of 10. It genuinely pushes the sorcerer into a realm of accuracy with their magic that other casters struggle to touch. Alright, let's move on to level 2. At level 2, you get the Font of Magic. This is what gives you your sorcery points. Sorcery points are a resource which you can utilize. With a Font of Magic, you can create spell slots using sorcery points and sorcery points using spell slots. You get a number of sorcery points equal to your sorcerer level. So at this point, you have 2. And you can create a spell slot with those, a first level spell slot with those. And that scales as the game goes on. I think it takes 3 to create a second level spell slot and up to 9 for a 5th level one. You can't go higher than that. But still, having a backup that you can just generate sorcerer's points with is fine. I think that having them and having the versatility to just give yourself extra power is very good, and I give it 10 out of 10. But the other thing that sorcery points power is meta magic, and this is why you may want to consider turning your spell slots into sorcery points instead, which you can also do. Meta magic is a power that takes your spells and just buffs them in a way that naturally makes them stronger. There are 10 options, we'll go over them in a future video, but the idea is that you're just taking a standard spell and enhancing it. You can make it so it flies further with Distance Spell. You can take away the casting components so you can cast it silently with Subtle Spell. You can take spells that naturally can target multiple creatures by upcasting them, and then do that with a sorcerer point instead, with Twin Spell. You can even take spells that have a casting time of an action and cast them with a bonus action with Quicken Spell, or give enemies disadvantage against your saving throw with Heighten Spell. You can protect your... There's a lot of things that you can do with sorcerer points using meta magic, and it depending again on whether you want to enhance your spells or cast more of them. That's what meta magic and font of magic do as a pair. The font of magic says, if all you're trying to do is go and do innate sorcery and blast people a bunch of times with standard spells having advantage and a higher DC, great. Just turn your meta magic point, your sorcery points into spell slots and keep blasting. Or if you're trying to be a little more precise and you're trying to be a little more powerful with a single spell, and you're like, no, I don't want to cast 3 spells this combat, I want to cast 1. But I want it to really, really work. That's when you take your spell slots, turn them into sorcery points, and then enhance that single casting with meta magic. This is why sorcerers are complicated, because you can do either or basically at any time. And choosing correctly is what makes you a good sorcerer or not so good sorcerer. I give meta magic 10 out of 10 because again, no one else in the game has an ability like this where they can just modify their magic basically at will. And yeah, it's incredibly strong. Now, level 5 rolls along and we get something called Sorceress Restoration. I didn't mention before that sorcery points only come back on a long rest. Just like innate sorcery charges, just like the spell slots of the sorcerer, they're not getting anything on a short rest. Sorceress Restoration grants them that. When they short rest, they can get half their sorcery points back, rounded down, which at this level would be 2. So you get 5 at the beginning of the day, and then on a short rest you get 2 back, and you can only do that once per day. So that gives you 7 instead of 5. Next level, you're going to have 6 sorcery points, and because it's halved, that means Sorceress Restoration would give you 3, so that's 9 throughout the day. And this just continues to bump up as you go. It's not a lot of sorcery points, but even now, even at 5th level, 2 sorcery points is enough to, in an emergency, grant you a subtle spell or a quicken spell. It can, there is no sorcerer meta magic that takes 3 sorcery points anymore. It's only 1 or 2. So even now, at level 5, Sorceress Restoration can grant you at least 1 more meta magic in a pinch. And if you're just needing 1 more spell slot, an emergency, shield or something, then Sorceress Restoration can also grant you that by giving you the sorcery points back and then turn it into a spell slot, and there you go. I think that this is a good feature. It's not amazing, but it definitely gives the sorcerer just that little bit more longevity in adventuring days where they're begging for long rests and all they can pull off is a short rest. So I give it 9 out of 10. Now, at level 7, you get Sorcery Incarnate. This one is... this is a tricky one. Sorcery Incarnate says that when you run out of innate sorceress uses, so this is the thing that powers you up, gives you advantage on your shots that you had at level 1, but you only can use it twice a day. Now it says if you're out of those uses, you can use 2 sorcery points to just activate it again. This is good because it means that you don't really run out of innate sorcery. You can use it every fight. 2 sorcery points is not terribly expensive, especially considering that it works on every spell innate sorcery. Whereas if you were to use 2 sorcery points for a heightened spell or a quickened spell, then that only works on 1 spell. So I think this is good. I do not think that it is, the most powerful thing they have. But what's interesting is that Sorcery Incarnate also says that once you've gone into innate sorcery, now you can use 2 meta magics at a time. That is much stronger than you might think. See, up till this point, you've only been able to use 1 meta magic per spell casting at a time. So, you're having to be strategic. Now, you can just dump your sorcery points into a spell to power it up more than once. You can use up to 2. This gives you the ability to combo things. You can subtle and twin a spell at the same time. I mean, you have to use your meta magic to do so, but as long as you're in innate sorcery, you can do both. You can distant and careful. You could, in theory, heighten and quicken a spell. That would cost you 4 sorcery points to do, which is more than half of what you've got, but it's still very strong. And the idea that you could do that in an emergency is wow. There's a lot of ways you can mishmash this together. And once again, we're talking about the complexity of the sorcerer because that is a lot to talk about. But the fact that you have this option to use innate sorcery more often, and now while you're using it, power your spells up twice as much. 10 out of 10. This is when the sorcerer really comes into their own. And keep in mind that every time you level up, you're getting more sorcery points, and your Sorcerer's Restoration's getting stronger every other level. So you're not going to be running out as much as you might think. Sorcery Incarnate says, hey, you know all those points you got? Why don't you spend them all? I can definitely see a lot of sorcerers running out once this comes online, but man, the power they're going to wield is going to make other spellcasters jealous. Now, what's interesting is that for the rest of the sorcerer's career, everything else they're getting is either based on their subclass, an ability score increase or feat, or an advancement in their spellcasting, because that's the last feature they get all the way until level 20. Yeah. Level 7 is the last class feature, and then it goes right to level 20 when they get Arcane Apotheosis. This is their capstone feature, and it's a fitting one, because it says that when you are using metamagic to power a spell, you can use... you have to be an innate sorcery for this to work, but by this point, you can use it basically whenever you want, because you have 20 sorcery points. You get 10 back on a short rest, and you get 2 free uses of innate sorcery, and then you can use 2 sorcery points to activate it, so you can use it whenever you want. But yeah, when you're in innate sorcery, now you can use a metamagic option on a spell for free. So a free quicken spell, or a free twin spell, or a free distant or careful spell, or a free transmuted spell. There's so much to say here, and because this stacks with Sorcery Incarnate, this means you can use 2 options on a spell and only pay for one of them. So obviously, if you're going to use like one that costs 2 and one that costs 1, the 2 should be the free one, and it doesn't specify it has to be the cheaper one. It just says you can use one for free. So if I'm going to subtle quicken, I'm going to quicken for free with Apotheosis, and then the subtle I'll pay that 1 sorcery point for. And now all of a sudden, no one's going to see it, and it's going to be so fast that I can do something else too. This is definitely a worthwhile capstone to push for. A lot of people like to multiclass the sorcerer, especially with paladins and warlocks. They're a classic multiclass pick. And this gives you motivation to push all the way to level 20. Because once you hit that level, I mean, most games don't go to that level, but if you manage to make it to that level, now you can use metamagic at will. You can just power yourself up with innate sorcery, and then you can just use metamagic over and over and over again with no limitation, really. Because even if you don't have to use 2, you can just use 1, and it's free. So in theory, let's just think about this for a second. Let's just do some quick mental math. 2 innate sorceries for free. That is 2 minutes or 20 rounds of innate sorcery. And then let's just imagine that you blew all 20 of your sorcerer's points, giving you 10 more innate sorcery. So that's 12 total, for a total of 120 rounds of innate sorcery per day. This means that if you're not dual metamagicking, and you cast 1 spell every turn, which you can't really unless you're counting cantrips, but I suppose we can count cantrips. This means you could use 120 metamagics for free. And the whole time your DC is going up by 1 and you have advantage on your attack rolls with spells because you're in innate sorcery the whole time. This is why the sorcerer is so good. This is all they need. And Arcane Apotheosis gives them free access to it once they hit level 20. So yeah, I'm going to say 10 out of 10 for Arcane Apotheosis. And overall, the Sorcerer, I think, is 9 out of 10. They're so strong because they're able to power themselves up in insane ways. Their only real weakness is that's all they do. They don't get weapons, they don't get armor, they don't have good hit points, they don't have good skills, and their class features are almost entirely rotating around metamagic, sorcery points, and innate sorcery. But that's it. And that's all they need, because that is what takes their big spell list and their chosen spells and powers them up. They are hyper customizable, and once you build a sorcerer, they're going to be good at whatever it is you build them for. They're not jacks of all trades. I mean, I guess they have good charisma naturally, so that means they're okay as a party face. But in general, sorcerers are good at what you build them to be good for. So that's why I call them an advanced and difficult class to play. But when you know how to design your sorcerer, how to choose their spells, how to choose their metamagics, and how to manipulate your sorcery points with good efficiency, you're going to have possibly the strongest caster out there. They can do things other casters only wish they could do. So, Sorcerer, 9 out of 10. Incredibly strong, arguably strongest caster. Hard to pull off. Gotta be good at what you're doing, gotta know how to build. So, if you want to play a Sorcerer, I highly recommend that you chat with your dungeon master, discuss what kind of campaign you're going to be in, discuss how long it's going to go for, discuss the prevalency of long and short rests, and make sure you know exactly what your sorcerer is going to have at their disposal. Because when you know that, you can design them for that, and you're going to be successful. It's going to be very, very strong. And if you're a new player and this sounds a little scary and a little complex to you, I don't think that the Sorcerer is the best beginner-focused class, but if you just focus on the simple basics, attack roll-based spells and defensive spells, and you just be the party blaster, you go into innate sorcery, you go pew-pew-pew with advantage, and if an enemy comes up to you, you cast shield or cast mage armor before the fight to keep yourself safe, you're gonna have fun. This is a way to empower yourself. And once metamagic rolls along, pack subtle spell, pack quicken spell. Those are two that one works in combat, one works out of combat. And both of them are very, very solid picks. There's a lot of options here. As you play the game, you'll start to understand which metamagics are better and why. But overall, the Sorcerer is 9 out of 10. Very potent, very complicated, very good. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more class reviews coming down the line soon. Have a good one, my friends.